Chapter 4. So the idea of reincarnation contains a most comforting explanation of reality by means of which Indian thought surmounts difficulties which baffle the thinkers of Europe. Albert Schweitzer. Elizabeth's first experience with regression occurred the following week. I quickly put her into a deep state of hypnosis by using a rapid induction method in order to bypass the blocks and obstacles that the conscious mind often constructs. Hypnosis is a state of focused concentration, but the ego, the mind, has the ability to interfere with this concentration by bringing up distracting thoughts. In using a rapid induction technique, I was able to put Elizabeth into a deep hypnotic state within a minute. I had given her a relaxation tape to play at home during the week between her appointments. I had recorded this tape to help my patients practice the techniques of self-hypnosis. I found that the more they practice at home, the deeper they seem to go in the office. The tape also helps patients to relax, and it often helps them to fall asleep. Elizabeth tried listening to the tape at home, but she couldn't relax. She felt much too anxious. What if something happened? She worried that because she was alone there was nobody to help her. Her mind protected her by allowing everyday thoughts to crowd in and distract her from the tape. Between her nervousness and her thoughts, she couldn't concentrate. As she described her experience at home with the tape, I decided to use a more rapid method of hypnosis to move her beyond the obstacles that her mind and her fears were creating. The most common technique used to induce the hypnotic trance is called progressive relaxation. Beginning by having the patient slow her breathing, the therapist then talks the patient into a deeply relaxed state by instructing the patient to gently and sequentially relax her muscles. Then she is asked to visualize or imagine beautiful and relaxing scenes. By using techniques such as counting backward, the therapist helps the patient go even deeper. By this time, the patient is in a light to moderate hypnotic trance, which the therapist can then deepen if desired. The whole process takes about 15 minutes. During this 15 minutes, however, the patient's mind can disrupt the hypnotic process by thinking or analyzing or debating instead of relaxing and flowing with the suggestions. Accountants and other people who have been drilled to think in a logical, linear, highly rational pattern frequently allow the chatter of their minds to disrupt the process. Even though I felt Elizabeth could go under deeply no matter which technique I used, I decided to use a more rapid method anyway, just to be sure. I told Elizabeth to sit forward in her chair, to keep her gaze fixed on my eyes, and to press down with her right hand, which was palm to palm with mine. I was standing in front of her. As she applied the pressure to my hand, with her body tilted slightly forward in the chair, I talked to her. Her eyes were fixed on mine. Suddenly and without any warning, I pulled away my hand, which was underneath hers. Her body, now unsupported, lurched forward. At this precise moment, I said, "Sleep," very loudly. Instantly, Elizabeth's body collapsed back into the chair. She was already in a deep hypnotic trance. While her conscious mind had been preoccupied with the sudden loss of balance, my command to sleep traveled directly and without any interference to her subconscious. She went directly into a state of conscious sleep, which is the equivalent of hypnosis. You can remember everything, every experience you have ever had, I told her. We could now begin the journey backward. I wanted to see which of her senses predominated in her recollection, so I asked her to go back to her last pleasant meal, and I instructed her to use all of her senses as she remembered the meal. She remembered the smell, the taste, the sight, and the feeling of a recent dinner, so I knew she had the ability for vivid recall. It seemed, in her case, that the visual sense was the most predominant. And then I took her back into her childhood to see if she could retrieve a memory from a placid period in her Minnesota childhood. She smiled a little girl's contented smile. I'm in the kitchen with my mother. She looks very young. I'm young, too. I'm little. I'm about 5. And we're cooking. We're making pies. And cookies. It's fun. My mother's happy. I can see it all, the apron, her hair up. I can smell the smells. They're wonderful. Walk into another room and tell me what you see, I instructed her. She walked into the living room. She described the large dark wood furniture, the well-worn floors. And then a portrait of her mother, a photograph that was on a dark wooden table next to a big comfortable chair. I see my mother in the picture, Elizabeth went on. She's beautiful, so young. I see the pearls around her neck. She loves those pearls. They're for special occasions. The beautiful white dress. Her dark hair. Her eyes are so bright and so healthy. Good, I said, I'm glad you remember her and that you can see her so clearly. The virtual certainty of remembering a recent meal or a childhood scene helps build the patient's confidence in his or her ability to recall memories. These memories show the patient that hypnosis works and that it is not frightening, that the process can even be pleasant. The patient sees that recalled memories are often more vivid and more detailed than the memories of the conscious, waking mind. After emerging from the trance, patients almost always consciously remember memories recalled during hypnosis. Only rarely are patients in such a deep state that they have amnesia for what was experienced. Although I frequently tape record regression sessions to ensure accuracy and to refer to when necessary, the tapes are more for me than for the patients. They remember vividly. Now we will go even further back. Don't worry what is imagination, what is fantasy, what is metaphor or symbol, actual memory or some combination of all of these, I told her. Just let yourself experience. Try not to let your mind judge or criticize or even comment on the material you are experiencing. Just experience it. This is only for the experience. You can critique it afterward. You can analyze it later. But for now, just let yourself experience. We are going back into the womb now, into the in utero period, just before you were born. Whatever pops into your mind is fine. Just let yourself experience it. And I counted back from 5 to 1, deepening her state of hypnosis. Elizabeth felt herself inside her mother's womb. It was warm and safe, and she could feel her mother's love. A tear trickled down from the corner of each of her closed eyes. She remembered how much her parents had wanted her, especially her mother. The tears were tears of happiness and of nostalgia. Elizabeth could already feel the love that would greet her birth, and this made her feel very happy. Her experience in the womb is not positive proof that the memory is accurate, or that it is indeed a complete memory. But to Elizabeth, the sensations and emotions were so strong and so powerful that they were real to her, and this made her feel much better. While under hypnosis, a patient of mine remembered being born as a twin. The other baby was stillborn. However, the patient never knew that she had a twin sister. Her parents had never told her about her stillborn sibling. When she told her parents about her experience under hypnosis, they confirmed the complete accuracy of her recall. She was indeed a twin. Usually, however, memories from the womb are difficult to validate. Are you ready to go further back now? I asked, hoping Elizabeth had not become frightened by the intensity of her emotions. Yes, she answered calmly. I'm ready. Good, I said. Now we're going back to see if you can remember anything from before birth, either in a mystical or spiritual state, in another dimension, or even in a past life. Whatever pops into your mind is fine. Don't critique it. Don't worry about it. Just experience, let yourself experience. I had her imagine herself walking into an elevator and pushing a button as I slowly counted backward from 5 to 1. The elevator traveled back through time and through space, and the door opened when I said, 1. I instructed her to step outside and join the figure, the scene, the experience on the other side of the door. But it was not what I expected. It's so dark, she said, with terror in her voice. I've fallen off the boat. It's so cold. It's terrible. If you become uncomfortable, I quickly interrupted, just float above the scene and watch it as if you were watching a movie. But if you're not uncomfortable, stay with it. See what happens. See what you experience. The experience was frightening to her, so she floated above. Elizabeth could see herself as a teenage boy. Having fallen off a boat in a storm at night, this boy had drowned in the dark waters. Suddenly her breathing slowed noticeably, and she seemed more peaceful. She had detached from the body. I have left that body, Elizabeth said, almost matter-of-factly. This had all happened extremely rapidly. Before I had time to explore the lifetime, she was already out of that body. I wanted her to review what had happened, to tell me what she could see and understand. What were you doing on the boat? I asked her, trying to back up in time even though she was already out of her body. I was traveling with my father, she said. And a sudden storm came up. The boat began to take on water. It was very unstable and rocking wildly. The waves were huge, and I was swept over the side. What happened to the other people? I asked. I don't know, she said. I was swept over the side. I don't know what happened to them. About how old are you when this happens? I don't know, she answered. About 12 or 13, a young teenager. Elizabeth did not seem eager to volunteer any more details. She had left that life early, both in that lifetime and in remembering it in my office. We could not get any more information. And so I awakened her. The following week, Elizabeth seemed less depressed even though I had prescribed no antidepressant medication to treat her symptoms of grief and depression. I feel lighter, she said. I feel freer, and I find I'm not as uncomfortable in the dark. Elizabeth had always been somewhat uneasy in the dark, and she avoided going out alone at night. At home, she often kept all the lights on. But in the past week, she had noticed improvement with this symptom. Unbeknownst to me, swimming made her feel uneasy and somewhat anxious, but in the past week, she was able to spend time in the pool and jacuzzi in her condominium complex. Although these were not her main concerns, she was pleased that these symptoms were diminishing. So many of our fears are based in the past, not the future. Often the things we fear the most have already happened either in childhood or in a past life. Because we have forgotten or only dimly remember, we fear that the traumatic event may become real in our future. But Elizabeth was still very sad, and we had not found her mother except in a childhood memory. The search would continue. Elizabeth's story is fascinating. Pedro's is similarly so. Yet their stories are not completely unique. Many of my patients have suffered from profound grief, from fears and phobias, from frustrating relationships. Many have found their lost loved ones in other times and other places. Many have been able to heal their grief as they remember past lifetimes and reach spiritual states. Some of the people I have regressed are celebrities. Some are seemingly ordinary people with amazing stories. Their experiences reflect the universal themes embodied in the unfurlong journeys of Elizabeth and Pedro as they approach the crossroads of destiny. We are all walking along the same path. In November of 1992, I traveled to New York City to regress Joan Rivers as part of a segment for her television talk show. We had arranged for the regression to be taped in a private hotel suite several days prior to the live taping of Joan's show. Joan arrived late, delayed by Howard Stern, the radio host who was her uninhibited guest on that day's show. She was not very relaxed, still in her television makeup, jewelry, and a beautiful red sweater. As we talked prior to the regression, I learned that she was still grieving the deaths of her mother and her husband. Although her mother had died years earlier, their relationship had been very intense, and Joan continued to miss her greatly. Her husband's death was more recent. Joan sat stiffly in a plush, beige pattern chair. The cameras began to record an extraordinary scene. Soon Joan slumped down into the chair, her chin resting precariously on the palm of her hand. Her breathing slowed and she went deeply into the hypnotic state. I went under very deep lie, she later said. The regression began, and we went backward through time. Her first stop was at the age of 4. She remembered stress at home caused by a visit from her grandmother. Joan could see herself vividly. I'm wearing a checked dress with Mary Jane shoes and white socks. We left for a more distant time. The year was 1835, and she was in England, where she was a woman of the gentry. I have dark hair, and I'm taller and slim, she observed. She had 3 children. One is definitely my mother, she added. Joan recognized that one of her children in that lifetime, a 6-year-old daughter, had reincarnated as her present-day mother. How do you know it's her? I asked. I just know it's her, she responded emphatically. Soul recognition often transcends verbal description. There is an intuitive knowing, a knowledge of the heart. Joan R. Ivers knew that this little girl and her mother were the same soul. She did not recognize the Englishwoman's husband, who was also tall and slim, as someone in her present life. He's wearing a beaver top hat, she elaborated. He was formally dressed. We're walking in a large park with gardens, she noted. Joan began to cry and wanted to leave that time. One of her children was dying. It's her, she sobbed, meaning the daughter whom she recognized as her mother in her current lifetime. Terrible, terrible, sad. The young girl died, and we left that time and place. We moved even further back in time, back into the 18th century. It's 1700 something. I'm a farmer, a man. She seemed surprised at the change of gender, but this was a happier lifetime. I'm a very good farmer because I love the earth so much, she observed. In her current life, Joan loves to work in her gardens, where she finds peace and a respite from her hectic show business life. I gently awakened her. Her grief was already beginning to heal. She understood that her precious mother, who was her young daughter in 1835 England, was the sole companion across the centuries. Even though they were now once more separated, Joan knew that they would be together again, in another time and another place. Elizabeth, who did not know about Joan's experience, came to me seeking a similar healing. Would she, too, find her beloved mother? Meanwhile, in the same office and in the same chair, separated from Elizabeth by only the minuscule gulf of a few days, another drama was in progress. Pedro was suffering. His life was burdened with sadness, unshared secrets, and hidden longings. And the most important meeting of his life was silently but rapidly approaching.